Hi guys, so we're back in Drawn from Artists and we're looking at this piece by Morandi. It is a still life. So you might think, what does that mean? But still life is often a subject where we have objects on a tabletop. It isn't just stopped in motion. Now, we have a series of small vases and different shaped bottles on a tabletop. So the first thing we'd always do is start sketching out a version of the drawing. Now this one's a slightly odd one. Notice it's kind of got a square profile at the bottom but turns into more circular as it goes up. Now the artist's work is a little bit wobbly, so it's not kind of really accurate and true, which you might quite enjoy. So I'm just sketching this. Now I've got quite a steep angle there. It looks kind of flatter here. The ratio of the bottle might not be quite right, but you see how I'm working lightly and I'm just making alterations. Now, if you're struggling with this, one thing you can do, we can do a symmetry plot. And with the symmetry plot, remember, what we do is we draw half of something, or we have half of something, trying to make it roughly in proportion. I'm not too worried about it being in the exact same place. So I'm drawing half of this bottle or vase. It's quite flat there, but I'm going to make it slightly more rounded. And then from this point to here, I'm going to make this measurement, a scrap of paper, and I plotted a point. So from about here, I'm plotting a point, and then I'm going to do a connector line. I might want to put a few more points. You see what I'm doing essentially? I'm just plotting a few points. Now, it might still be a little bit tricky. The centre line might just guide your drawing. Got a kind of nicer rim on his version than mine, so I'm just going to modify it. Another thing you can do is you can take a piece of paper, scrap of paper, fold it in half, and you could draw onto here. So if I'm looking at maybe this particular shape here, it's kind of curved at the bottom, so I'm going to cut a curved line, and I'm going to come up vertically. I'm going to come inwards, and then it comes slightly wider, and it's a very strange shape, this one. So I have created a little bottle shape. I'm going to open it up, and there I have something that I could draw round into my design. Now it's not exactly the same, so I can make some modifications, just more rounded at the bottom. Some of you will have seen me do this before. I could take the sharpness off the corner. The neck of it was quite wide, so I'm going to make it a bit narrower. This is a fiddly cut. You'd probably need some small scissors to do this job, but you could do it on a larger scale. So I'm going to pop that onto my image. It's about the same height as that. And I'm going to just draw around it. Now, when we look at the artist's work, notice the lines, the way he's done it and the way he's shaded into it. So I'm only going to draw those 3 bottles. This neck is much longer than the neck I've done, so I'm just going to extend it. But I'm only going to draw those 3 bottles, so I'm not asking you to draw everything in this one. I might put a corner of a table top into it as well. Creating a line here that's roughly parallel there. So I've created a little frame where I'm going to do the work. And I'm going to use a biro. I picked up a blue because I think it looked quite nice in blue. When I was going through my drawer, check this old boy I found in there. 1976 pen. It doesn't work, by the way, but I was hopeful that it would. But anyway, I found this biro, a blue biro. And the marks that we have on here, they're like diagonal lines, slightly different angles. See how I'm just lightly drawing over them to get into the space of the action of doing that. Now in some places they're a single line, in others they're hatched. So if you look at that one, it's like a mesh. Some lines are going this way and some lines are going this way. So I might practice some of my mark making over here. So there's my practice lines. I might try some longer ones. I'm fairly confident. I might try some where I'm building up in different directions. Now, we need to get dark and light tones. Let's have a little look at this. Look how much darker it is in the background. Those lines are closer together. So if I'm going to do this, I'm going to have to work with them closer. And if I do my test, I can see that where I've worked closer, they are working closer. So I'm actually going to start doing something slightly unusual. I'm going to start in the background. And I'm just going to draw lots of these little lines. Now, I'm not drawing them all the way along, I'm drawing them in stages. I think my biro is actually running out. I'm going to have to switch biro. So I've got another biro that's actually working, and you can see what I'm doing. I've got my fingernail covering a part of the image so I can draw confidently and bash onto my fingernail or work away from it to create a nice clean edge. You can see me doing this and then building up the marks. Don't worry if they look uneven at this stage. We'll worry about that afterwards. Now you start working back across at a 45-degree angle, working from the, turning the work to suit you, turning it around, and then building up those marks as you go. Right guys, I confess it has taken a while to do this. It's not the neatest job in the world, but I've been fairly consistent. Now, if you look at it and you squint your eyes at it, you see reduced information. So you begin to see the patches and tones a little bit clearer. So if it looks a bit patchy or it looks a bit light in an area, just go over the top of it a little bit. It doesn't matter that your marks are kind of layered up. If you've lost some of the edges as well, that's cool. I've lost little bits around the top here. But if you haven't defined your edge enough, notice I'm going back in and I'm defining it a little bit more. Notice I'm turning this around when I'm working to get a nice clean area to work from, and I'm working where I can see best. So don't be afraid to turn your work around to make it easy for yourself. Now we're going to look at a single bottle. So if I look at the side of this one, there's a different plane on the side of it very, very clearly. I'm just going to reach over and grab a cube. So you see a light face and a dark face, just like you do on this cube. So what I'm going to do is on this face, remember it's just a single light line. And then on the other face, it's a double line. So I'm going to do the other face as well. So I'm just going through it nice and defined. And then I'm going to build up into that face. And you can see the two different planes. Now the background doesn't look dark enough, doesn't stand out enough. So I'm going to work back into the background, just along the edge, letting the lines fade out. And suddenly you can see it standing out a little bit more. So it's quite clear on those two faces, a real difference. Now I can see like a little rim along here, so I'm going to just generate some closer marks. You can also see the rim on the side. Now whilst tempted to draw a line in a different direction, like a vertical line, I want to stick with something that's quite true to the artist. Now this side down here, it looks slightly darker. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to lightly just draw a pencil where I want my slightly darker area to be. Now the neck of my bottle and that bottle are quite different, so I'm just going to apply some close marks into this area and build them up. Again, I might want to work back into the background in a moment or two. So even though I'm using a biro and you perceive that a biro has a sort of single type mark, it doesn't. You can build up different sorts of marks. I might just define the edge a little bit more, nibbling into it with a biro. And if I want to make the background darker again, remember I'm not going to draw an outline, I'm just going to build into into it and make it a little bit darker, the marks closer and denser together. So there is a little shadow underneath it, and again I'm going to do that by putting my marks very close together and building up. Now into this vase we're going to do the same thing again. I'm going to follow the drawing and I'm going to just sketch in where I'm going to try and build up my darker marks on that side. You could obviously do this with a pencil if you don't have a biro, but what you're inclined to do with pencil is apply different weights to create your tones. And then here what we're trying to do is use hatching. Now into there's a very dark section that comes down here, and there's kind of like a medium section. There's almost a white section there, a light bit, and then there's a section here and a teeny bit of dark on that ridge. So I'm going to go for one bit at a time. Dark down this side. I've not gone straight to the edge, I've just gone after a little gap. Go dark into there as it wraps around. Build up some different direction marks into it, following the 45-degree overlap principle that we've been following up to now. So those are the darkest bits I want to pop on. Now in here I'm going to go just for the diagonal, but quite close together. And in here, the diagonal, again quite close together. And then a little bit onto that edge down there. And if I feel I need to define the background, remember, and stand it out again, I just work back into the background around it, but kind of blend the marks in so it doesn't stand out too much. If you see pencil lines going through, that's okay. Later I would dab it with a rubber. At the moment this will smudge a little bit if you work onto it. And finally into this one we'll map out the dark areas yet again. I'll do that in fast forward. So we've got most of the bottles mapped out, and now I'm going to do this tabletop. I'm not going to worry about any of the shadows at the moment. I'm going to turn it around because I've got a kind of sense that it's a nice angle, like drawing the line feels better at this angle for me. So I'm just sticking with the diagonal line. I'm looking for the pencil lines that I've got underneath for where the edge of the tabletop would be. I'm trying to keep these roughly parallel. If they're not, guys, don't worry too much about it, but if you can, give it a go. I'm beginning to lose the edge of my table. You can see that tabletop now onto there. Now in places it doesn't look quite even, and you can see little bits of shadow behind some of these. So I might now start thinking about a little bit of shadow where I'm building up. Remember, just don't be tempted at this stage to suddenly start putting outlines around things. Work with that kind of etched mark, that kind of built up mark. And then if we look at these different surfaces down here again, remember the planes on the cube, got a top and two faces. So on this one, this has got a recess in the edge of it. I'm not going to bother with that. I'm just going to draw the edge in. And we can see the hatched mark into there. And then down this side I'm going to do the line being consistent with my angle. It is hatched on that side as well. You can see the different faces even though I've not put the hatch mark onto it. I'll go quiet because I'm concentrating. And those marks look a bit uneven, so what I will do is I will put that hatch mark onto it. Using the old fingernail technique to not draw over the line. Now you might have done this in a slightly different way, and that's absolutely fine. It's a kind of intense drawing. You're thinking about tone and form and shape. There's quite a lot to this. A little bit more focused than some of our more experimental drawing from artists. You can see how I'm building up into that. Over for like a third direction here, just to even out where there was a kind of uneven band down the middle of it. Could add a little bit more shading onto the back of the tabletop, a bit more shadows. But hopefully you begin to see something that looks a little bit like the Morandi. It gives you a bit more confidence about how you can explore and go about mark making and hatching.